Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Asad Lalji. Welcome to another session of Avid Online, a series launched in April of 2020 in a direct response to the lockdown so we could continue to bring to you the very best from the world of art and culture. For those joining us for the first time, a very special welcome. Please refer to the chat box for more information on Avid Learning, our partners, and speakers for this evening's discussion. The platform for our interaction may have changed, but we stay true to our mantra, as always, that learning never stops, and this evening will be no different. Live History India and Avid Learning present Cultural Capitals Future Legacies of India's Cities, the series that aims to spotlight India's cities, their legacy, and contributions that have shaped the nation's heritage and continue to have tremendous contemporary influence and impact. Cities under the cultural microscope have included Hyderabad, Ahmedabad, Jaipur, Chandigarh, Lucknow, and Kohima. The highlight is on the particularities of each city's culture and heritage and how these aspects have changed and evolved over time, influencing their perception in the wider world. Varied perspectives of cities' identities of these urbanscapes have been presented as informed by history, hidden stories, and local insights. And this brings us to our evening session. And thank you for joining us on the next stop, or the seventh edition, on this exciting cultural journey through India's cities, Indore. Ranked as one of the cleanest cities in India, allow me to introduce our evening speakers and give them a warm virtual welcome. Award winning filmmaker, writer, and director Stanley Hector, independent researcher, scholar, and author Dr. Sugandha Johar, composer and lyricist Samir Rahat, visual artist Avdesh Yadav, and they will be in conversation with co-founder and head of research at Live History India, Akshay Chauhan. For more about each of our speakers, please refer to their very impressive bios that have been posted in the chat section. Today, the speakers and experts will look at Indore through varied lenses, the city's growing arts and cultural legacy, its renowned architectural heritage, and its emergence as a regional cultural hub. Our panel will examine Indore from the past, present, and future perspectives and chart its journey and evolution through the years which have shaped its distinct cultural fabric. Please note the session would last 75 minutes, followed by a 15-minute Q&A, and Akshay will be taking questions, so do keep posting them throughout in the Q&A box. And on that note, thank you once again. Over to you, Akshay, to level set and look forward to a fascinating session. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session on one of my favorite cities, Indore, capital of the Holkars and a seat of one of the most important princely states in India. Indore hides within it varied legacies. The legacy of the Marathas, the great Queen Ahilyabai, the great Marwari merchants who made fortunes here, the poets, writers, singers who thronged the city. Now, sadly, my knowledge of Indore and its past ends in 1947, but I have this lovely panel with me today who will share with us the perspectives on vibrant Indore, today's Indore as a cultural city. So I want to begin by asking each of the panelists, beginning with Samir, what does Indore mean to you as a city? Especially since it's your Purkho ki bhumi, the city of your ancestors.
See, Indore has had a very interesting connection for me because it has been this place where almost like a wonderland, almost like a dreamland for me, because I did not grow up there. So I'd like to clarify that to everyone if they have any kind of galatsfahmi. That I did not really grow up in Indore, but I've had this intense connection with the city because of my father, of course, being there, and the fact that I grew up in Bhopal because my schooling was done there. And Bhopal and Indore are like neighboring cities, and it just takes like 2.5 hours. And even when I was young, I would just be get on my bike, and with a friend of hers, we would just rush to Indore because the only mall that we had in Madhya Pradesh was the Treasure Island Mall. And we would and everybody knows about that. And, we would just go to TI because we thought that, and Indore has always been like, known as the mini Bombay. And I wasn't really visiting Bombay as much, so I would just visit the mini Bombay. And of course, it has been the Purkho ki zameen. Actually, my Purk, jo agar Purkho ki baat karen, so they've actually been from Devas and not from Indore particularly. But like I said, similarly to Bhopal, Devas is also like a twin city with Indore, and we all know that you can just, if you're in Devas, you're almost in Indore. So it really doesn't matter, you just have to take that left turn, the famous left turn from the bridge, and you're in Devas again. So for me, Indore has had this wonderful connection of literature and of my father and of my family, my paternal family, and a lot of friends. A city that I always looked up to in terms of wow, such an advanced city. Wow, it has got everything. Because I was in Bhopal. So for me, it's that kind of a connection. For someone who's young, who wanted everything, who wanted to always live in Bombay, Indore was my gateway to Bombay.
Oh, fascinating. Now, before I come to Avdesh, I would like to share a very interesting anecdote about Devas, which Sameer has just mentioned. Now, Devas, located around 30 kilometers from Indore, is a fascinating town. Apparently, it was a princely state, a kingdom of the Pawar family till 1947. And what is so unique about Devas is that there were these two brothers and they decided to divide their kingdom. So till 1947, one side of the street was, ruled by one brother's family, and the second side of the street was ruled by the second brother's family, and they used to call it Devas Junior and Senior. So in places like Indore and Dhar, you find most fascinating anecdotes about the places from the past. So Avdesh, coming to you, you have seen Indore change over decades and all. So what does Indore mean to you as a city?
Indore is home. Obviously, Indore is home for me because I have been born, brought up, raised here, and I have also studied art only here. I am practicing my art in Indore itself. So it means a lot. उसके अलावा ये है कि इंदौर में मैंने बहुत सारी चीज़ें बदलती हुई देखी, एज यू हैव ऑलरेडी मेंशन. So there was a time when there were lots of textile mills. It was a big part of the culture in Indore because the area where I grew up belongs to it is called mill area. I have, I think, 3 or 4 textile mills surrounding my area where I live. Even the Nehru Nagar where I live, basically it was developed for the mill workers. So this is one thing, and the other thing I have seen my stream, the fine arts. It's a very old school, 1927 established. One of the legends of Indian art, very first artist of modern art, M.F. Hussain, studied here. So these are the things which I am proud of, and there are many things I am not proud of about Indore. I will talk about them also.
Yes, as every city has its good and bad aspects, which we shall explore in our talk further. Stanley, what about you? I mean, what does Indore mean to you as a city?
Being my place of birth, I think I definitely feel a good connection with the city. And this is also the place where I did my schooling and graduation from. So I've kind of seen the city through different phases of my early childhood life. And then I think most importantly, the way I relate with the city is by it being the place where I started my filmmaking journey from. During my early filmmaking days, we used to shoot a lot of short films around the city. And some of the short films we have shot in interior parts of Old Indore. So people there have been really supportive, kind, and encouraging to us for the work that we did. And I think apart from the residents, I think also the team that I had at that point on, we were very enthusiastic about making films, although we didn't have much experience with filmmaking. But then we wanted to create something and then, show the city through our films. So I think those are the memories that I cherish the most about the city now.
Oh, lovely. Now I'll come to Sugandha. Now, Sugandha, you have seen Indore of the 70s and how it has changed and all. I mean, some nice memories of Indore that you have. I'm sure our audience would love to hear from you.
Actually, my memories of Indore go back much further because we had a family connection with Indore. We used to visit Indore once in a while, and so my earliest memory of Indore is sometime around 1959, much before this thing. And at that time, I loved the city because it was beautiful, it was green, it was clean. And I was coming from Chennai. My dad was posted there. And I was surprised to find that at that time, all the main roads used to be washed every morning. And so it was really, really clean. And of course, from the time I can remember, I've been fascinated by architecture. Around that time in Rambagh and other areas, there were some very old Vadas also, as well as in Krishnapura. So just looking at this brickwork and the design of the brickwork and the chhajjas, I enjoyed that. I gave that up. Then I became pretty intimate with Indore in 1970s when I went to live there for a while. It was not the same. Though Indore is clean today, it has lost all its environment.
Yes.
In the 50s, the rivers were clean. They were not nalas. They had started converting to nalas, but in 70s, you still had a rivers. And the green cover, 9 lakha ke sachmuch 9 lakh ped lagte the aapko. Today, you can't find a green leaf there. So as much as I like the architecture, it saddens me to see how dreadfully Indoris, I think I should consider myself one of them because I lived there for a while, have treated the environment.
So,
Avdeshji, I just had to say this because
I agree with you 100%.
Clean के साथ पेड़ भी लगा देते हम.
I must share that this is the story of every city in India, the loss of
not
heritage.
To the extent it has happened in Indore. You just had to see it.
Yes. So now coming back to the cultural cities, I must go to Samir and ask him. I mean, Samir, now you come from a very distinguished family. Your father, Rahat Indori, was such a big name in Indore and in India for his great work which he has done. So if you can please share the perspectives, of how the city affected your father's work. Your father, I mean, if you can share some perspectives on your father, his contemporaries, that would be really nice.
Yeah, I feel like he had, like I said, similarly, I've had a very distant connection with Indore, but a deep one because of the fact that my father, sort of grew up there and started making his name from that city. And he's always said that, I mean, he had literally had his pen name as Indori. So you can imagine how much that city means to him and meant to him. And I still, I'm going to actually address him in the present tense. I still haven't gotten used to addressing him in the past tense. So bear with me there. But yeah, so it's still, I feel like it still means to him a lot, and I feel like it's all the poetry that he's done. In fact, Avdesh bhai would know that because he was friends with my chachu Adil, and Rahat Saab was also a painter, and he was
Yes,
great with MF Hussain Saab. That is something that people do not know much about, and in fact, Avdesh bhai would know way.
He was a very good calligrapher.
Yes. And he used to paint the boards of,
yes.
You remember that, Avdesh bhai. So he used to he started as a painter, and when he was in his early days of being a poet, उनका एक शेर है जिसमें वो कहते हैं कि गजल की रोटी खाना बहुत मुश्किल होता है. So it's a struggle when you're a poet. It's not easy for every poet. So he used to paint you remember the cinema boards that used to be there, because we didn't have print, so he used to paint those also, like the massive ones actually. So his inclination towards art, his inclination towards literature, and then he obviously became a professor in the university. And for him, my perspective has always it has always been an outsider's perspective about his journey. We never really spoke about how his journey was per se, but my brother Satsaj always told me, how it went, and my mother told me about it. And I think he owed everything to Indore. That's the impact of Indore that he's had in life. And then he took Indore, the name itself, and the city's name all over the world. Actually, a lot of people associate Indore with his name, to be honest. So that's that. And yeah, I guess I have my early memories of me being with him in Indore. Are basically, I used to go for basketball cluster tournaments from my school from Bhopal to play in Indore. And he would take me to my favorite restaurant, Nafis restaurant, back in the day, for lunch and everything. So many early memories wahi. And then of course there's Chappan, with the legendary Chappan, where I used to just hang out all the time and eat. My priorities were very straight when I used to hang out with him, was to eat as much as I can. So those are like the kind of memories that I've had. And I've recently have discovered this newfound interest towards really exploring the city. So I'm actually glad to be a part of this panel in the first place. I'm more like more than a panelist. I'm actually here to know more about the city that I've not really known as much through you guys, to be honest with you. So I was more excited about, that I'll get to know so many things through people who actually lived there and grown up there, because I've got this connection, and hopefully get inspired and explore and live in Indore as much as I can, in the future.
So, Samir, I wanted to ask you, your father or Salim Khan Saab or Javed Akhtar Saab, they were all had connections with Indore, and till now, I mean, I think the big name today on social media is Zakir Khan. So, you see this connection of Indore with language, with poetry. I mean, how do you see that?
See, Javed Saab had his the most decisive years of his. I mean, and I'm talking about him quoting that in one of his books, saying that his most decisive years were actually in Bhopal. And similarly, even Rahat Saab did his graduation from Barkatul University in Bhopal. So Bhopal and Indore, they both have had that, the whole, कहते हैं ना हमारे लैंग्वेज में, वो जो पट्टी है पूरी, उसमें लिटरेचर की खुशबू है, उसमें there's this it's the Hindi belt, and not just Salim Saab, not just Javed Saab, even Zakir, or I consider myself half Indori, to be honest, because even though I've not grown up there, and there's a sense of pride when you're in Bombay and cities around the world, and when you say that I'm from the Hindi belt, because a lot of people have actually pointed out, particularly saying that आपकी हिंदी इतनी अच्छी कैसे है,
yes.
So that is बहुत होता है ये. It's funny actually, because especially in a place like Bombay, Delhi वगैरह में उतना नहीं, but if you're in Bombay, if you're down south in Bangalore, and it's crazy how we end up using words like यार केवल 2 घंटे में कर लेंगे. अब तो केवल पे लोग अटक जाते हैं कि केवल कौन बोलता है यार, but it's just such a part of our vocabulary, the way we are growing up. So वो हवा में ही लिटरेचर है, उस मिट्टी में ही लिटरेचर है, मेरा ऐसा मानना है. वो बहुत नेचुरल है. It's not forced at all. It's not shoved down your throat कि ये पढ़ लीजिए. वहाँ कल्चर ही ऐसा है कि आप पढ़ ही लेते हैं, आप जिक्र करते ही रहते हैं लिटरेचर का, या गजल सुनाना, या एक दूसरे में आप जब हैंग आउट भी कर रहे हैं जनरल, you'd rather discuss poetry than discussing people. I mean, we actually discuss a lot of people in Indore, so kafi. But yeah, so in my perspective, it's just in the air, and it's just in the atmosphere of both the cities.
And one very interesting thing which you were previously sharing with me is, okay, the age of ghazals is gone. I mean, it has moved to social media and poetry, and the great mushairas is gone. But now there is this new thing about the blues. I mean, you do something like the blues, where you mix the traditional Urdu music in the form of the blues. So tell us something about that. And I mean, how would a younger generation connect with this form, evolving, changing form of music?
Yes, see, देखिए ghazal as a format is a very, very complicated format and the most wonderful one. I'd say the most gorgeous form of writing. And again, like I said, it's the most complicated one. Very nuanced and आजकल की जो जनरेशन है उन पे वक्त नहीं है इतना तो समझें कि एक शेर में पूरी कहानी एक पूरा महाकाव्य छुपा हुआ है दे आर वी आर इन द टाइम ऑफ TikTok and Instagram. We just want to scroll. If we don't like something, we just call it out. And Ghazal is not like that. People do not have time to really pick up a book and read it, right? They rather, use Kindle or just, be online, which is a wonderful thing, to be honest. What I thought that what can I do to the entire form of Ghazal and bring it to the newer audiences? What can I do to make it cool again? So I've always been a fan of blues music particularly, and I've grown up listening to blues music because of my nanu. He had some records and I used to listen to. And in fact, blues music has had its influence in Bollywood music for the longest time. आप कोई भी 50s 60s के गाने उठाएंगे, R.D. Burman साहब है, C. Burman साहब in fact blues music लाने लगे थे. तुम जो मिल गए हो तो ये लगता है जहाँ मिल गया. It's a blues song. It's out and out 12-bar blues. So मुझे ये लगा कि if I can incorporate ghazal, which is almost like a heritage and the writing form of my mother and my father, and bring it to the newer audiences in a new format, but not tempering with the format of it, because वही मुश्किल है कि if I change the format of the ghazal and make it into a geet, make it into a song, just adapt it, that becomes an adaptation. And the only sweet spot I found in terms of music was blues music, where I did not have to tamper with the format of ghazal. The matla would still be a matla, and then my sher would still be a sher, and I can actually come to the makta and then finish the song, because blues is all storytelling and ghazal is also storytelling. In fact, multiple stories in one ghazal. So I came up with that idea. It was a happy accident, to be honest. And then I started performing my father's pieces in a blues format. And then I started picking up John Elia Sahab, who's one of my favorite poets, and Firaq Gorakhpuri, and all of these poets. And now it's become a thing, apparently. And nobody else is doing it. And I would actually like people to sort of, the youngsters to pick up Urdu blues and, or even other genres, to be honest, and try and explore the heritage and the privilege that we have known as ghazal, in this country. Which is primarily has always been practiced in the Hindi belt, like I said, in UP and in MP, and not down south as much, because नीचे गजलें नहीं कही गई, क्योंकि गजल जब आई तो वो पर्शिया से आई और पहले यूपी में और इस सब जगहों में, बिहार में भी थोड़ा बहुत है, but mostly it has always been MP and UP. So मैं चाहता हूँ youngsters ऐसा करें, and that's how Urdu blues happen, and it's going very well. I'm going to put out an album next year with 12 ghazals in blues format, and yeah, it's an interesting thing. Let's see how that goes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing those perspectives. Now, I would like to go to Avdesh. And Avdesh, I wanted to ask you that Indore has a very rich legacy in the fine arts. And it all starts with this Fine Arts Institute, which started during the state times. Now, unfortunately, it is not as famous as the MSU of Baroda and all, but you must tell us the great legacy that Indore has from Constantine Brancucci, Man Ray, MF Hussain, Devlali Kar. प्लीज आप जरूर बताइए कि ये जो इंदौर की जो कहानी है फाइन आर्ट्स की वो कैसे शुरू हुई.
Before the actual Institute of Fine Arts established by the Holkars, there were teachers. Devlalikar was appointed when Maharaj thought that there should be a school to literate teachers into visual art. Basically school teachers के लिए पहले उन्होंने कोशिश की थी कि उनको visual art की training मिले. And then in 1927, formally it was established. When it was a small, just a 2-room set, maybe on MG Road. बोलिया सरकार की छतरी के ठीक सामने. It was the place. Then later it was housed in the other building. जो देवलालीकर मैंने जो आपको इमेज दी है, वो उसके पीछे नीचे स्कूल है और ऊपर फाइन आर्ट्स कॉलेज की बिल्डिंग होती थी. लेकिन उसके अलावा भी दिल्ली कॉलेज में अच्छे आर्टिस्ट का टच रहा है। राजा दीनदयाल होते थे जो एक ही वॉज एकम्प्लिश्ड फोटोग्राफर एंड पोर्ट्रेट मेकर ऑल्सो। तो उन्होंने बड़ौदा और दूसरे खानदानों के पेंटिंग्स भी बनाए थे, जो एक उस वक्त ट्रेडिशन था अंग्रेज़ों के आने के कारण जो चीज़ इंडिया में इंट्रोड्यूस हुई थी, पोर्ट्रेट मेकिंग और फैमिली पोर्ट्रेट्स एंड ऑल ऑफ महाराजास, ये था। उसके अलावा शांति निकेतन के एक बहुत बड़े चित्रकार बीसी सान्याल, वो थोड़े समय तक दिल्ली कॉलेज में पढ़ाते थे, फाइन आर्ट्स, विजुअल आर्ट्स, ड्राइंग टीचर आप बोल सकते हैं आजकल के उसमें। तो ये एक ट्रेडिशन था। लेकिन सबसे मेजर जो चीज़ हुई, देवलालीकर की ये खासियत थी कि उनके जितने शिष्य थे, जब भी वो बाहर कहीं परफॉर्म मतलब अपना पेंटिंग दिखाते थे, तो पीपल यूज टू बी अमेज्ड अबाउट इट, बिकॉज उनका, जैसे आप देखेंगे यदि इफ यू गो इनटू हिस्ट्री ऑफ विजुअल आर्ट इन इंडिया, तो बेसिकली जो कोर्स स्ट्रक्चर है वो सब वेस्ट से आया हुआ है, क्योंकि अंग्रेजों ने आके इस तरह के एकेडमी स्टैब्लिश किए। तो क्या होता था कि उनका एक ट्रेडिशन है कि पहले स्टिल लाइफ बनाएंगे, फिर एक मॉडल से बनाएंगे, और फिर हम बाद में अपना जो अपने लेवल पे जो अपनी चीज़ प्रस्तुत करेंगे। तो देवलाली के कर के साथ ये था कि वो खुद तो एक डेकोरेटिव इंडियन स्टाइल में काम करते थे, पेंटिंग उनका जो था जिसमें रिलीजियस सब्जेक्ट पेंट करते थे वो। लेकिन उनके जितने दो शिष्य, खास नाम लेना चाहूँगा मैं, एम एफ हुसैन, वर्ल्ड रिनोन, एंड अदर वन इज एन एस बेंद्रे। आप देखेंगे कि दोनों के काम में भी कितनी डिसिमिलैरिटी है, एक वेरिएशन बिल्कुल अलग अलग किस्म का है उनका। तो एम हुसैन तो 2 या 3 साल रहे और फिर बम्बई चले गए। उन्होंने अपनी बायोग्राफी में लिखा है कि वही नौलखा जिसका जिक्र सुगंधा जी ने किया है, कि नौलखा में खड़े होकर उन्होंने सोचा कि दिस वे गो टू बॉम्बे, और ये आगरा, तो ही प्रिफर टू गो टू मुंबई। सो दिस इज द थिंग। तो ये एक रहा, और ये आज तक मेंटेन्ड है कि इंदौर के जो प्रैक्टिशनर्स हैं फाइन आर्ट्स के, पेंटिंग के, तो आप पाएंगे कि किसी भी टीचर के इन्फ्लुएंस में उनका स्टाइल नहीं है। दे हैव देयर ओन विजुअल स्टाइल। और आपको यदि इफ़ यू गो इनटू इट डीपर, तो आपको मिलेगा ये देखने को, जिसमें बहुत सारे लोग हैं जो दूसरी पीढ़ी के बाद की पीढ़ी के लोग हैं। अखिलेश भोपाल में रहते हैं, समीर शायद जानते हो, अखिलेश जी हैं जो बहुत आज की तारीख में एब्स्ट्रैक्शनिस्ट, बहुत मेजर पेंटर हैं। वो भी इंदौर से पढ़े, और उनके फादर भी मल्हार आश्रम स्कूल जो है इंदौर का पुराना, जो कि होल्कर्स ने स्टैब्लिश किया था, उसमें वो ड्राइंग पढ़ाते थे। एंड ही वाज फ्रेंड्स विद एम एफ हुसैन एंड रजा साहब। इस तरह के लोगों से उनका दोस्ती थी। तो ये एक बहुत सिग्निफिकेंट चीज है इंदौर के विजुअल
पर
कल्चर।
अगर आप इंदौर का कल्चरल लेगेसी देखो, आपने एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग बात कही कि जो राजा दीनदयाल थे, वो तो उनका वन ऑफ द अर्लीस्ट फोटोग्राफी स्टूडियोज तो इंदौर में ही खुला था। पर जनरली कैसे होता है, फाइन आर्ट्स वहां पे पनपते हैं जहां पे पेट्रनेज होता है। बट एक इंटरेस्टिंग साइड ये है कि एम एफ हुसैन हो या बेंद्रे हो, ये एक बिल्कुल कठिन परिस्थिति से निकले थे। दे वर नॉट कोर्ट पेट्रन आर्टिस्ट लाइक राजा रवि वर्मा की, उनको दरबारी पेट्रनेज या जमींदारों का या इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट का पेट्रनेज मिल रहा है। सो आपको क्या लगता है, व्हाट वाज इट अबाउट इंदौर दैट अलाउड the development of this its own school, like jaise unlike the Bombay school or the Calcutta school of painting, which obviously had patronage, but what was it in Indore that allowed this arts to emerge here?
I think because the teaching of Devlalikar is a major part here, because he never suggested his student to copy himself. He always allowed them to explore and to use whatever means they would. तो उन्होंने ये इंकरेजमेंट किया बच्चों को कि वो किसी की कॉपी सीधे सीधे न करें, और नकल करने से बेहतर है कि आप अपना कुछ एक्सप्लोर करें। दूसरा, यहाँ की एक और बातचीत जो आप जानते ही हैं कि मेरी खुद की फैमिली 2 पीढ़ी पहले यूपी से आई हुई है, तो दैट वे आई एम हाफ UPN and half Malvi. So my father used to speak very good Malvi. तो ऐसा एक यहाँ पर कल्चर रहा है कि आपको गुजराती, मराठी, यूपी, बिहार के लोग, साउथ इंडियन, तो इस तरह की लर्निंग यहाँ पे रही है, तो इन्फ्लुएंसेस भी उतने सारे रहे हैं. एंड इंदौर वाज आल्सो वेल कनेक्टेड विद, बिकॉज ऑफ आगरा बॉम्बे रोड, इट वाज कनेक्टेड विद ए मेट्रो लाइक मुंबई. और बॉलीवुड का इफेक्ट तो हम सब जानते हैं इंदौर पे कितना है. और राहत ने समीर ने पहले ही बताया कि मिनी बॉम्बे लोग कहते हैं. ये सब जो चीज़ें हैं, किसमें एक कॉस्मोपॉलिटन टाइप की एक बात इंदौर में रही है पहले से. तो दिस इज द रीजन आई थिंक. एंड होलकर्स विजन ऑल्सो, होलकर्स का जो विजन था, क्योंकि उन्होंने, आप देखिए कि उस वक्त कितने राज परिवारों ने इस तरह की कुछ एंडीवर किए होंगे, आई डोंट नो, बट दिस इज फॉर श्योर दैट कॉन्स्टेंटिन ब्रांकुसी और मैनरे जैसे लोगों के साथ काम कर रहा है जो व्यक्ति, या जो उनको कमीशन दे रहा है, तो ही मस्ट बी लर्नेड पर्सन.
So, I would like to tell our audience that Maharaja Yashwantrao Holkar of Indore, the last ruling Maharaja of Indore, was a great aesthete, and he invited artists from around the world to come to Indore. Konstantin Brancusi, a Romanian sculptor, was specially invited, and he came to Indore. There was a project which Maharaja wanted to do with him. There was also a very famous German architect, Eckhart Muthesius, who built the famous Manikbag Palace of Indore. And then again, Man Ray, one of the greatest photographers in the world in the 1930s, also was patronized by the Maharaja of Indore. So thanks to this international vision of its Holkar Maharajas, it gave, a strong base was formed, which allowed the development of culture here. And one more point, which Avdesh very interestingly pointed out, was also the transportation, the railroads. Now, thanks to the textiles, the industry, the ways of communication, Parsis settled here, the Maharashtrian aristocracy, the Marwadi industrialists, and it just created this beautiful melting pot, which allowed a unique Indori culture, which can be seen in its language, food, and all these different aspects of the city even today. Now, Avdesh, one more question I wanted to ask you was, why is it that this Institute of Fine Arts, which could not, even though it is one of the oldest in India, could not thrive unlike the MSU at Baroda? What do you think actually happened here?
I think this is surely goes to Indori people also, because they didn't care about their heritage, and not even not only in this regard of the fine arts college, some other institutions also, some great libraries, some like आप देख सकते हैं कि आमिर खां का जो घर है, उसको कभी आपने ऐसा कोई बताएगा नहीं आपको कि एक दर्शनीय स्थल है, या फिर नगर निगम ने उस पर कभी ध्यान दिया हो कि इसको हम अलग ढंग से डेवलप करते हैं. जबकि ऐसी कोई चीज़ यूरोप में होती, सपोज आल्स में कभी वैन गॉग गए थे, तो उन्होंने एक रेस्तरां जैसी छोटी चीज़ को भी एक म्यूजियम में कन्वर्ट कर दिया. हमारे वहाँ उल्टा कर रहे हैं, उस चीज़ को स्मार्ट सिटी में मर्ज करके उसको ख़त्म किया जा रहा है. दिस इज हैपनिंग. तो दिस इज द मेन रीज़न कि लोगों ने ध्यान नहीं दिया. जो बड़ौदा से आप कंपेयर कर रहे हैं, हालांकि देयर इज़ नो कंपैरिजन उस तरीके से, लेकिन in terms of proper place and proper flourishing, तो बड़ौदा wins there, क्योंकि हमने एज ए सिटी हमने केयर नहीं की हमारी इंस्टीट्यूट. We have to be blamed.
Oh, wonderful. So, Stanley, I would like to come to you next, and I would like to talk to you about mini Mumbai as the city is known before. So, Stanley, I wanted to ask you. You have been a filmmaker in Indore city. So how do you see, considering that Indoris always had a love for cinema, love for Bollywood, a lot of people went and were successful in the film industry there. So can you just tell us something about this whole filmmaking culture of Indore?
Yeah, I think the connection with Bollywood goes a long way. The city has given legends like Lata Mangeshkar, Kishore Kumar, then Salim Khan, Salman Khan, and Johnny Walker, one of the most celebrated comedians of his time. I think since 1930s, that connection has actually grown more stronger and stronger. And in recent times, we have seen that now mainstream Bollywood shoots have also started happening in the city. Like for example, a few months ago, Oh My God 2 was shot in some parts of Old Indore with Akshay Kumar and Pankaj Tripathi in the star cast. So these shoots have now started inspiring more and more upcoming filmmakers to pursue a career in filmmaking. This positive shift that I've seen in the filmmaking culture in the recent times is that earlier, whenever a young filmmaker would decide to make a film, then they wouldn't have so much of exposure online or through more experienced people in Indore. But then in recent times, as more and more young people and students have started making films, so they have kind of developed this network among themselves where they share contacts, they share resources, they kind of collaborate with each other. So there's a very positive shift that has happened in the filmmaking culture in the recent times. Because I remember when I started making short films, and while I was working on my first short film in 2012, so we didn't have many resources to distribute our films online. So at that point of time, I think there was only one YouTube channel called Pocket Films that kind of distributed indie short films online. And apart from that, there were not many major platforms where you could find audience for your work. And another route was through film festivals. The one that we decided to take was that to submit our film to film festivals, and once it got accepted, then we kind of felt that sense of relief that okay, now our work will be actually watched by real people, audience. So that thing has now changed, as now there are so many OTT platforms, and so many other channels where you can kind of share your work. So that shift has also happened, and I think it is also because of the digital revolution that is happening. Because now it doesn't matter where you belong from, or where you shoot a film. If your work is good, if it's praiseworthy, then people will actually kind of appreciate it, share it online, and then watch it. So that shift has happened. And apart from that, I think now not just with the films, but then also with the digital content which is being produced in the city. So there are many more production houses which have come up, and they are producing good sketches and online digital videos. So yeah, I think people are with the filmmaking perspective, I think good people are picking up pace with the production part.
Now, one very interesting thing is Indore is known to be one of the cleanest cities in India. Now, there are a lot of people who disagree because of the issues with pollution and urban planning and all. But you have done a film around a cleaning, somebody who's a cleaning Karamchari. And how was that experience like?
So yeah, that project was actually part of my film direction course at film school in Prague. So we were supposed to shoot a short documentary film focusing on a single person and highlighting their life's journey and their dreams and aspirations. So I kind of decided, we discussed with my team, and then we decided that since Indore is garnering a lot of attention through this cleanliness drive, so why not let's look for someone who's actually working on the streets, who's actually cleaning, and then talk to them and highlight their life story. So we met a few people, and then finally we met this lady Indra Shamlalji, who's working as a cleanliness worker. And I must say, the first time when I met her, I was actually captivated by the energy that she radiated. I mean, she was so enthusiastic and so energetic about cleaning that it was very captivating. So we finally decided that okay, this is the subject that we should focus on, and then we should cover her story and kind of share the story with the rest of the world. So what makes her special is that. It's the little extra effort that she puts into her work. So generally, the cleanliness workers, they have a reporting time of 6 a.m. But Indira Shamlalji, she wakes up at 3:30 a.m. in the morning, and then she reaches her designated colony at 4 o'clock, and then she begins cleaning work. And once she's done with the cleaning work, she also makes a rangoli in our colony, which is actually admired by a lot of residents there. And she has become kind of like a mini celebrity there, where people, residents walking by, they would just greet her, take her blessings. So that particular emotion actually hooked us, that it's the extra effort that she puts into her work, which makes things special. And also we kind of wanted to show that though India is regarded as the cleanest city of India, but then what actually happens behind the screen, behind the curtains. And we wanted to highlight that story, that okay, this is what the work which is actually goes on, in the process of achieving that recognition.
So,
So
I wanted to ask you as a filmmaker, now, if you actually see somebody like, say, Mahesh Manjrekar, you see a distinct Mumbai taste in his films, or a Sanjay Leela Bansali, that Kutch, Gujarat Kutch flavor, or there are filmmakers who have that Delhi, the old Delhi, this thing. So, among the filmmakers of Indore, do you see that Indori identity, Indori touch appearing in the films, or I think it's still way ahead?
I think that's actually missing, because that is also something that I feel as a filmmaker, because we don't have that particular unique identity as a filmmaking place. Because when we talk about Rajasthani films, so they have a different culture. When we talk about South Indian films or films from Kerala, they have a different culture. But then when it comes to MP or Indore, we don't have that particular kind of heritage or a unique identity to be regarded as a different unique filmmaking identity. So yeah, I think that is something which is missing. But then the filmmakers here, they have started to kind of follow this professional approach to filmmaking, with all these professional shoots happening in the city. Now things have started to get more and more organized, and they have like started to put in more and more planning work into their development and into the execution of the films. So that is something which is happening. But then as an identity, I think it's still missing. We don't have that unique filmmaking identity.
So now I would like to come to Sugandha. And Sugandha, you have done some phenomenal work on one of the greatest queens of India, Ahilya Bai Holkar, who ruled from Maheshwar, and whose military headquarters was in Indore. And I mean, it was the legacy which in some way indirectly influences the city. And I would like to talk to you about two of my favorite topics. One is the built heritage, and second is the food. So let us start with the food, and tell us
No,
about the
first,
flavor.
let me correct you. Ahilya Bai was never a queen. She was a Jagirdar. Let's be very clear on that part. The Holkars were never kings or queens at that time. It was only after Yashwantrao Holkar first crowned himself, and not even directly. What he did was he accepted the suzerainty of an Afghan king. Remember that. So there was no king, no queen, whatever you call. She was not a queen. And the same. Number two, Indore was not her military headquarters. Indore was a saranjam of of Tukoji Holkar, who was appointed the Subedar by the Peshwas. Again, they were Holkars, but both of them were Jagirdars. There was no Raja, and that was not her military headquarters. She had no military.
Okay, so Sugandha, let me say she was the queen of hearts, and at least for me,
Okay.
she's a queen. I mean, as a like somebody buff in history, I mean, sometimes we do make mistakes because they're books with interpretations. Now, coming to the Indori food, so the queen of hearts to the the king of the stomachs. So please tell us about Indori food.
Oh, Indoria food is wonderful. In fact, it's very funny. I once met a lady who was producing some mixture, namkeen, in Indore. And I asked her, okay, why were you doing it here? I mean, why not in Bombay? Why can't I get good kaju katli like I get in Indore, in Bombay, or in Pune? And she explained it's Indore water. The water there gives it a special taste. Everybody talks of Chappan Dukan, but I will like to talk about Sarafa. Avdesh ji, kya kehna hai aapka? Because Nothing compares to the joy of eating at Sarafa. And Sarafa, I also like it because of the reuse of the space. Sarafa was actually a whole area of jewelers. But in the evenings, when they put the shutters down, the space in front of their shops turned into these food stalls, and wonderful food stalls too. Whatever you talk of Chappan Dukan, I keep going at least 2 or 3 times a year to Indore and I visit there, but it's never like the garadus, the jalebis, the evaporated milk, kachoris that you got in Sarafa are just not available in Chappan Dukan. And Indore is actually live for their food. I mean, all of us take food to live, but Indoris eat, live to eat. So a typical morning in 70s weekend Indore used to be, or even in the 60s when I went there earlier. First thing in the morning, you go out and have jalebi and doodh if you haven't had a late night. And with that, you have either the poha or the sabudana khichdi, along with maybe a samosa. Then barely touch home for lunch, and back around 3:34, you start eating somewhere. I don't think we ever really had proper dinners. We waited till about 8:39 to rush off to Sarafa and gobble some more. Then a movie, and a very late night jalebi and doodh again. So the food is still important, and people still claim Indore food is good. Yes, it is good when you compare to others. But if you have eaten the older food, something seems to be missing. I can't find any garadus or tupkins. There used to be a little shop outside Holkar College. The guy turned kachoris into sandwiches, and he called it tupkins. I've been dying to eat them. Can't find them.
Oh wow, the lost foods of Indore would make a story in itself. But one thing which you mentioned about the water of Indore is very interesting, because when we were doing Live History India, I was doing research on Bikaner. I mean, that's what came about. The salty water of Bikaner made the Bikaneri bhujia so delicious. But one aspect about Indori food which always intrigues me is bhutte ka kiss. This whole mashed corn,
grated, not mashed.
The grated corn concoction, which is so delicious. And I'm very intrigued because corn came with the Americans, and it's a much later invention. So how do you think the bhutte ka kiss became so popular in?
I think it is part of the Maharashtrian influence. Because as a Maharashtrian family, I grew up eating bhutte ka kiss at home. And that probably comes from the way the Maharashtrian use unripe jawar. So they probably experimented with this and created it. And the so-called Indori poha, I love to tell everyone, is actually, the poha actually comes from Konkan. And it's the Maharashtrians who brought it there. Indoris don't like me telling that, but I enjoy bursting mythical balloons.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So now I'm now next, after the great round of myth busting and fact correction, I'm going to go to Samir, and I'm going to ask him about music and the cultural institutions and a city. Now, since you have been performing in Bombay and cities around India, I wanted to ask you, to make music and culture popular among the younger generation, do you think you need these cultural spaces, or now with the advent of internet it is irrelevant? You don't need, for vibrant city, you don't need a physical space.
See, nothing can replace a physical presence of the audience and the way an artist feels when they actually hear the claps in person. I've been performing online for the last two years or so, since the pandemic began. And it's been a new experience, but it doesn't replace the feeling of being with the audience. And I feel like slowly we all need great spaces to perform, and even Indore, I feel like there always have been these clubs. Like I said, it's been this city which, as compared to other cities in Madhya Pradesh, it was always ahead of other cities in terms of performing spaces and clubs and pubs, and because of the so many students being there, it's also almost like a student city. A lot of students, because of the colleges and institutes that are that. So the club culture, which recently came to other cities of Madhya Pradesh, it has always been there in Indore, and a lot of artists had space to sort of perform. But we always need more, to be honest. Like, just one space or two space does not really suffice. And a lot of independent artists, what I've realized is, do not get to perform in the classical spaces where the classical musicians are performing, or the bigger artists are performing. There's a certain division that is there, that independent artists are considered as okay, theek hai, kuch kar rahe hain, kar rahe hain. But I feel like they've been doing a lot of serious work, and indie musicians are also trying to incorporate their culture and their history in music now. And um, एक अजीब सी धारणा है कि यंग है तो ज्यादा पता नहीं होगा इन्हें, and I think people need to let go of that. And I've seen a lot of young bands incorporating Kabir and Bulle Shah and Waris Shah in their music now, which is wonderful. I'm trying my best to incorporate Ghazal and Urdu literature in my music. So if we can give these artists and bands an opportunity to perform in bigger venues like the auditoriums in Indore, or the places, for example, like Bharat Bhavan in Bhopal, like the places which are considered as the prestigious venues, वहां पे सिर्फ क्लासिकल म्यूजिशियन ही क्यों परफॉर्म करे, वहां पे सिर्फ why not independent artists and indie bands come in and do get the opportunity to play there. That's my take on venues. And yes, definitely we need more venues and more festivals.
But do you see that culture changing in Indore, where, or is it still that at the prestigious venues only the classical?
It is still that. I feel it's still that. I've been in the scene for over 10 years now. I've been trying to get to get to a venue which is like a big auditorium somewhere in Indore, or like anything that is sort of prestigious, and I am not getting that opportunity. Even so, that line is blurring now in a place like Bombay. If there are bands performing at Royal Opera House, for example, which is again considered as a very prestigious venue. So Abhibi, we have a long way to go, and if the people who are moving the scene in Indore, they can open up a little bit to the younger generation and embrace them, it will be nice.
But for example, like in Bombay, there are these independent venues opening up in places like Bandra and all, which make these great institutions irrelevant. So don't you think a solution would be to have these indie cafes where some great performances are happening, and the area, like for example Kala Ghoda, like kind of a thing for Indore, where the cultural people come together and just have their own space in a city.
Yeah, that's exactly what I feel that we should have in Indore. That's exactly what is missing in Indore right now, like a Kala Ghoda location, in Indore, where we have a certain, it could be Sarafa itself. So I would say कि वहीं पे कुछ ऐसा एक yearly कुछ festival चालू हो जाए जहाँ पे there's an amalgamation of classical artists, the people who are who've been around for the longest time, and we have a beautiful long history of classical music in Indore, as we all know, and those musicians and the younger musicians and the bands can come together in a festival, and I think that would be incredible, considering that the kind of music history that we've had with Indore also. So
no, I would like to come to Avdesh ji, because that brings us to a very interesting point जो हम बात कर रहे थे कि एक साइड पे ये है कि जो younger generation of musicians हैं उनको opportunities नहीं मिल रहे, and you were telling me how जो classical music सुनने वाले हैं वो कम हो रहे हैं. एक टाइम पे जो क्लासिकल म्यूजिक की महफिलें होती थी वो इतनी पॉपुलर होती थी, और अब वो it's just going down and all. So how do you see this balancing between the older traditions of the classical traditions of Indore and now this dynamic younger tradition which is emerging, and both of them are complaining in their own way?
Yes, एक तो राहत में समीर ने बड़ी अच्छी बात पहले भी उठाई थी कि अभी जो आज की जो जनरेशन है दे डोंट हैव टाइम। इवन मेरी अपनी मेमोरी पे इसका असर पड़ा है इस चीज का, जिसको आप स्वाइप करते रहते हैं तो आई फॉरगेट नेम्स। जब मुझे बताना हो तब नाम याद नहीं आते हैं, जब याद रखना हो तब नंबर याद नहीं आते हैं। तो ये जो ओवरऑल है ये हर किसी के साथ हुआ, ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है कि कोई एक पीढ़ी हो, लेकिन स्पेशली यंगर जनरेशन, बिकॉज आई ऑल्सो गो टीचिंग एट फाइन आर्ट्स कॉलेज। तो मुझे ये देखने में आता है कि जैसे समीर ने बताया कि एक तरफ तो आपको एकदम जीरो मिलेगा, उनको पता ही नहीं है कि व्हाट गजल इज ऑल अबाउट और व्हाट नज़म इज। दूसरी तरफ आपको ऐसे बच्चे मिल जाएंगे, यू आर अमेज्ड कि आप मतलब यू कांट इमेजिन कि इंदौर में बैठ के यदि कोई अफजाल अहमद सैयद को पढ़ रहा होगा, पाकिस्तान के पोएट को। और आई विश कि राहत समीर जो हैं नज़मों में क्या पता काम करते हैं या नहीं करते हैं, बट आई विश ही वुड।
बिल्कुल करता हूं, बिल्कुल।
तो बिल्कुल मैं चाहूंगा कि मतलब मैं ऐसा देखना चाहूंगा कि कभी आप रिसाइट करें अफजाल अहमद सैयद को ब्लूज में, तो क्या मजा ही अलग होगा।
जी जी।
और मैं एक चीज और एश्योर करना चाहूंगा कि आई डोंट नो अबाउट अदर वेन्यूज, बट इंदौर की देवलालीकर आर्ट गैलरी में मैं जरूर कोई प्रोग्राम और एग्जीबिशन करूंगा, तो आई वुड लाइक योर बैंड टू परफॉर्म देयर। वहां पे हमने एक बार केन जुकरमैन जो स्विट्जरलैंड के सरोद वादक हैं, अली अकबर खां के शिष्य, उनसे हमने रिसाइटेशन करवाई थी, उनका रिसाइकिल करवाया था। उसके अलावा हमने पोइट्री सेशन भी वहाँ कई बार करवाए। विनोद कुमार शुक्ल वहाँ आ चुके हैं, ध्रुव शुक्ल भोपाल से, ऐसे लोग आए हैं। तो आई वुड डेफिनेटली
ओके, सो अवधेश जी, आप यू हैव टच्ड अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग पॉइंट, क्योंकि ज्यादातर हमारी जो ऑडियंस है वो इंदौर शहर से नहीं है और उनको जानना है शहर और उनके इंटरेस्टिंग कल्चरल स्पेसेस के बारे में। तो अगर आप हमें बताएं कि इंदौर में, आई मीन जैसे आप अभी बता रहे हैं कि देयर आर सम वेरी वाइब्रेंट कल्चरल इंस्टीट्यूशंस जहां पे ये हो रहा है, तो उसके बारे में प्लीज आप जरूर बताइए हमें।
इंदौर में मैं एक्चुअली कोई ऐसा रेगुलर प्लेस आप ऐसे तो नहीं देखते। जैसे रविन्द्र नाट्यगृह है, वो तो हम सब जानते हैं कि रविन्द्र नाट्यगृह एक जगह है जिसको आप हायर करते हैं ऑडिटोरियम में। नाउ इट इज रन बाय भास्कर ग्रुप, थोड़ा सा सेमी प्राइवेट टाइप हो गया है। जैसे हमारी देवलालीकर आर्ट गैलरी है, वो इजीली कैन बी हायर्ड। हालांकि अकोस्टिक के हिसाब से इट इज बिग एंड उसमें आवाज गूंजती है, तो वो एक प्रॉब्लम है। लेकिन इट्स ए वेरी गुड प्लेस टू हैव ए कॉन्सर्ट आल्सो। मतलब आई हैव विटनेस दीज थिंग्स देयर। तो ये एक जगह है। दूसरा, आजकल बहुत सारे इंदौर में भी एक बॉम्बे जैसा बड़े शहरों जैसा कल्चर आया है कि देयर आर सर्टेन कैफेज जो बैंड्स को इनवाइट करते हैं और अच्छे से अच्छी श्रोता लोग आ रहे हैं, पैसे दे के आ रहे हैं। ये भी हो रहा है, ऐसा नहीं है कि सब कुछ खराब है। तो ये सब चीजें हैं जिसको। और दूसरा, एक जैसे हमारे मालवा के फोक सिंगर हैं, मतलब देवास जिले के ही प्रहलाद सिंह टिपानिया, तो अभी उनकी एक मालवा कबीर यात्रा होने वाली है। हर साल वे एक मालवा कबीर यात्रा करते हैं जिसमें बम्बई, दिल्ली, चेन्नई बहुत अच्छे सिंगर्स लाइक्स ऑफ जैसे नेशनल अवार्डी रही हैं पिछले साल की बिंदु मालिनी, वे आती हैं, वैसे लोग आते हैं और बहुत अच्छे अच्छे परफॉर्म, कबीर कैफे जैसे बैंड आते हैं। तो वो भी एक अपने स्तर पे एक प्रयास कर रहे हैं जिससे यंग जनरेशन और ट्रेडिशनल म्यूजिक जुड़ता है फोक लेवल पे। तो ऐसी
बट अगर किसी भी शहर का अगर कल्चर को पनपना है तो पेट्रनेज लगता है। अभी
बिल्कुल।
तो आई मीन आपने देखा है कि डिफरेंट प्रोग्राम्स में, सो व्हाट इज द काइंड ऑफ पीपल हु पेट्रोनाइज दीज दीज कल्चरल इवेंट्स? Is it more the younger generation? Is it more the wealthy elite, the middle class? I mean, आप अगर पेट्रोनेज देखें इंदौर में इन अलग अलग आर्ट फॉर्म्स का, तो वो कहाँ से आता है?
बहुत ऑर्गेनाइज्ड पेट्रोनेज है, ऐसा तो मैं नहीं बोलूंगा। लेकिन यह है कि कुछ जैसे जलसे, जैसे सोहनलाल सांघी स्मृति एक समारोह होता था क्लासिकल म्यूजिक का गांधीया। अभी कुछ, एक तो पेंडेमिक के कारण में मुझे पता नहीं लेटेस्ट उन्होंने कुछ किया या नहीं, लेकिन वे रेगुलर, ये एक प्राइवेट इंस्टीट्यूट है जो करवाते थे, वो लोग करवाते रहे। जैसे मैंने बताया कबीर यात्रा आपको, तो ये प्रहलाद सिंह टिपानिया जी अपने हिसाब से करवाते हैं, वो कोई गवर्नमेंट एडेड नहीं होता। ऐसे और भी लोग हैं जो आई माइट नॉट रिमेम्बर राइट नाउ, बट देयर आर मेनी। जैसे एक छंदक फेस्टिवल होता है जिसमें डांस, वो क्लासिकल डांस करवाते हैं, उनका भी नाम मुझे भी याद नहीं आ रहा। छंदक फेस्टिवल रेगुलर है इंदौर में। अभी पेंडेमिक के कारण 2 साल से ये चीज़ें नहीं दिखी हैं, बट देर आर फ्यू पीपल जो प्राइवेटली भी और पब्लिक फंडेड भी इस तरह के जलसे इंदौर में होते हैं। इंदौर में जैसे मराठी कल्चर में एक सानंद न्यास है, वो बहुत रेगुलर एक्टिविटी हर साल उनकी होती है, तो दिस इज वेरी गुड। ये कुछ चीजें हैं जो चीजों को बचा के रखी हुई।
I wanted to ask you because I am a theater buff, and मेरी बातें होती है like people in Hyderabad, and because Mumbai and Pune especially have a very vibrant theater culture. So how do you see the theater in Indore? I mean, वहाँ पे plays होते हैं, लोग आते हैं देखने के लिए हिंदी theater?
आते हैं, मैंने जैसे बताया कि कम हुआ है थिएटर, नो डाउट, मतलब बहुत कम। मेरे बड़े होने से लेके अभी तक थिएटर का कल्चर उस लेवल पे वाइब्रेंट नहीं है जैसा कि मुंबई पुणे में है, या इवन बड़ौदा गुजरात में है। इंदौर में उतना, देयर आर पीपल, नो डाउट दे आर वर्किंग, उस तरह के लोग जरूर हैं जो बहुत शिद्दत से काम कर रहे हैं, लेकिन जैसे स्वानंद खुद थे यहाँ पे, स्वानंद किरकिरे, जब ही वॉज हियर एनएसडी जाने के पहले भी और एनएसडी आने के बाद भी उन्होंने रोमियो जूलियट किया था, जो लास्ट मुझे याद है यहाँ पर उन्होंने नाटक किया था। उसके अलावा भी कुछ जैसे मराठी थिएटर यहाँ रेगुलर है, और जैसे कि मैंने बताया सानंद न्यास रेगुलर एक्टिविटीज में इन्वॉल्व रहता है। बट ओवरऑल यदि देखें तो थिएटर के लेवल पे इंदौर में उतनी हैपनिंग नहीं है जितनी जबलपुर में होंगी।
But that's very interesting. Why Jabalpur? Is there a reason कि जबलपुर में?
जबलपुर एक्चुअली इप्टा का बड़ा वो रहा है, वहाँ पे लेफ्टिस्ट विचारधारा के लोग काफी रहे हैं, साहित्यकार बहुत हुए हैं, मध्य प्रदेश के इंदौर से भी हुए हैं नो डाउट, तो वो एक रहा है। और दूसरा, उस तरह से वो इंदौर जैसा कमर्शियल नगरी नहीं बन पाया उतना ज्यादा जबलपुर। किसी जमाने में शायद जबलपुर को कैपिटल बनाने का भी प्रस्ताव था मध्य प्रदेश की, बट वहाँ पे ये सीन रहा। और काफी, अभी मुझे रिसेंट बिल्कुल नहीं पता, लेकिन हाँ ये बात है कि जबलपुर में नाटक काफी रहा है, और अच्छे से, क्योंकि इप्टा में जहां जहां इप्टा रही है मेरे ख्याल से वहां पे नाटक काफी सक्रिय रहा है, तो जबलपुर में यही कारण होगा बिल्कुल।
That's very interesting. Before I go to Stanley, I want to speak about an audience question. Mr. Dinesh Rana has asked that why was it that Bhopal was chosen as capital and not Indore? I mean, now based on whatever little I know, when Madhya Bharat was formed, when princely states were merged, there was a competition between Indore and Gwalior, and Gwalior was a bigger princely state. And Bhopal, I think Nawab Hamidullah Khan of Bhopal had put a condition that he will merge his state only if it is made the capital, and it was a kind of a compromise that na Indore, na Gwalior, we will make Bhopal the capital. So I hope that answers your question, Mr. Rana. Stanley, I would like to come to you and get an understanding of the film scene in Indore. I mean, are there venues where these indie films are staged? Are there film festivals happening? Do you guys get together? I mean, how is it there in Indore?
So yeah, this is one thing that is actually missing in Indore currently, because I, as a filmmaker, really feel that more and more world cinema and then good quality films should be screened in Indore. So there have been like a few organizations who organize film festivals locally in Indore, but then they kind of discontinued it after their first or second editions. And so I think this is also which if any good organization, if they take up that initiative to kind of screen more and more good films, so local filmmakers here could actually watch those films, get inspired by them, and then kind of go ahead in that direction. So this is something that should be worked upon, especially in Indore. Because in Bhopal, as Avdeji said and Samir Raj said, that Bharat Bhavan is a very good venue, and at times they also screen films. And then there was this time when I watched Blue Umbrella, I think by Pankaj Kapoor, one time in Bharat Bhavan. So that kind of venues are not there in Indore. So that should be worked upon. And also with filmmaking workshops, I think if filmmakers locally here could actually kind of get together to organize a workshop, or just discuss about films, because there was this time, I think back in 2013 or 14, when we started making films. So we kind of made this film group where we decided to watch films every weekend and then have a discussion, Q&A discussion on the films. But then even that couldn't continue after a period of time. So if that could happen, I think it would be very much helpful for the upcoming and young filmmakers who are stepping into this journey of filmmaking.
Now, that's a very interesting point you touched upon, because I want to ask, like, in absence of great cultural institutions like, say, a Bharat Bhavan or an NCP of Bombay, like, I live in Bandra, and there are a lot of these indie filmmakers who just have these evening meetups. People gather. It's listed online. Anybody who wants to watch interesting films, we all gather together, and then we just discuss what we have seen, and it's such a interesting sharing of ideas and all. So when these great cultural institutions don't exist in a city, I mean, how do you see people getting around, especially because now internet has made it so easy to connect people, for you to get world cinema? I mean, this, unlike in the 70s or even early 90s, where somebody from Indore did not have an access to world cinema, today you have on a click of on your phone. So don't you think that now, instead of just saying that, I mean, this doesn't exist and that doesn't exist, as a solution, it's very easy to have these small meetups and groups and all?
Yeah, I think the problem, especially with filmmaking scene, is that after a point of time when a younger student, he starts making films. So after a point of time, they quickly move to Mumbai. So then they don't stay here in Indore, and then I think that is what is the problem, which is currently there, because people or filmmakers should actually settle here in Indore and then develop the culture here. Because most of them and the friends that I have known personally, so after a point of time, they all move to Mumbai and then they settle there, they kind of work there. So even I was there in Mumbai before the first lockdown for 2 to 3 years. And then after the lockdown, I decided that with this digital or online culture coming up, I think the place is not that important. And if you work on your films anywhere, I mean, for the production part, you can anytime go to Mumbai or any place in India. But then for the development part, if people could stay here in Indore and then kind of develop more and more of clubs, like screenwriting club, or also with the actors, I think. But then slowly this culture is developing. It's not that substantial, I would say. But then it would take years to gain that pace. But then people are started to form groups, like for theater. The theater is still okay. I mean, like they have the actors group, but with filmmaking, it's not that concrete or substantial. So I think people should take more initiative. They should, after if they work for a few years in Mumbai, then maybe they can come back. They can form their group in Indore and then have film groups here.
Oh, interesting. I would go to Avdesh ji, and we have a question here from Mr. Prakash Vyahare. And he says, please tell us something about the Sanand Cultural Group, Mama Saheb Mazumdar Music Festival, Shani Mandir Music Festival, yes, and Bengali Club Durga Puja. So are these, I mean, since I'm not from Indore city, I'm very intrigued by these.
All these are on, all these happenings are regular. ये सब होते हैं रेगुलर. सानंद न्यास का मैंने बताया आपको, उनके सारे प्रोग्राम. आई एम नॉट इनटू इट, बट आई नो सानंद डज इट रेगुलरली. शनि महाराज व जो ये जो बड़ा रावला के पास ही है शनि मंदिर, उसमें भी आप देखिए, उसमें मोहम्मद अहमद हुसैन आ चुके हैं. उसमें हिंदुस्तान के बड़े बड़े क्लासिकल म्यूजिशियंस आते हैं, वो भी चालू है, रेगुलर है. और मामा साहब मजूमदार फेस्टिवल आई हैव हर्ड ऑफ, टू बी वेरी फ्रैंक, लेकिन मैं उसमें कभी शिरकत नहीं कर पाया हूँ, देखा नहीं है मैंने सीधे, बट वो रेगुलर है, नो डाउट.
तो मुझे ये पूछना था, दिस ब्रिंग्स अस टू अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग क्वेश्चन, कि ये जो फेस्टिवल्स होते हैं, जैसे कि ये दुर्गा पूजा, बंगाल क्लब का दुर्गा पूजा हो गया, मामा साहब मजूमदार फेस्टिवल हो गया, तो हर साल ये जो फेस्टिवल्स होते हैं, वो क्या एक शहर के जो कल्चर को जिंदा रखने में क्या ये मदद करते हैं? लोकल जो स्पेशली लोकल आर्टिस्ट्स को पेट्रनेज मिलने में क्या ये एक प्लेटफॉर्म जो यंग टैलेंट को प्लेटफॉर्म दिलवाने के लिए, do you think they are very important, these festivals?
I think these festivals are important, no doubt. But ये थोड़ा डाइसी है कि इंदौर के लोकल टैलेंट को पेट्रोनेज मिलता है कि नहीं, क्योंकि क्या होता है, जैसे कि अब मैंने अभी समीर को बोला कि आप आइए हम आपका कराते हैं. I have never asked any local band from Indore to perform there. बट आई एम आस्किंग समीर. तो ये होता है नेचुरली कि जैसे कि कोई वेल स्टेब्लिश्ड नेम है या कोई बाहर के लोग हैं तो आप उनको ज़्यादा इजीली एडॉप्ट कर लेते हैं. और दूसरा फिर क्या होता है, लोकल लेवल पे दूसरे भी प्रॉब्लम्स होते हैं, कुछ पॉलिटिकल हो सकते हैं, कुछ ग्रुपिज्म के हो सकते हैं, वो दैट मे बी द रीज़न. बट अभी ऐसा है कि और फिर finally you ultimately you have to look out for the quality. Ab if I am doing something I will scrutinize in my own way. तो ये लोगों का तरीका अब अलग अलग हो सकता है, किसका क्या क्राइटेरियन है ये तो वही बोल सकते हैं. बट ये तो है कि मैंने देखा है कि लोकल को पैट्रनेज मिले इसके लिए लोगों ने आवाज भी उठाई है. बट दिस इज नॉट समथिंग विच इज लाइक यू नो, जैसे मैं हमेशा बोलता हूँ कि ये कोई कोऑपरेटिव सोसाइटी टाइप की चीज नहीं है कि एवरीबडी हैज इक्वल शेयर ऑफ 100 रुपीज. यू कांट distribute it like that. You have to have look for the quality.
Now, I'm going to come. This brings us to a very interesting question, and I'm going to ask Avdesh, you, Stanley, Sameer, and then Sugandha as well. Now, if local talent doesn't get a platform, how will they develop? And then you see now it's a circle. So, Avdesh ji, I'll start with you. So, how do you start developing quality in local talent? Because अगर आप American cities देखें, even England, France में देखें, यूरोप में देखें, तो ये जो लोग ये सारे जो ग्रेट बैंड्स हैं, म्यूजिशियंस हैं, थिएटर परफॉर्मर्स हैं, वो लोकल अपने टाउन के परफॉर्मेंस वेन्यूज में पढ़ के फिर एक एक स्टेप आगे बढ़े हैं. सो हाउ डू यू डेवलप quality in your local cultural performers and those people there?
See, what I see is like these two young people, Stanley and Sameer, इन्होंने अपने अपने लेवल पे पीयर ग्रुप में मिलजुल के बैठ के अपनी अपनी स्किल को हॉर्न किया, डेवलप किया, और ये लोग आगे भी कर रहे हैं. लेकिन कहीं पे एक जगह पे एक पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम पे एक होता है जब जो आपका क्वेश्चन है कि पैट्रनेज हो, तो यहाँ पे इन्वॉल्व होता है लोकल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन भी. और मुझे लगता है इंदौर में ये एक बहुत बड़ी, अभी क्या हो रहा है, जैसे अपने ओवरऑल हिंदुस्तान के सीन में देखें तो बॉलीवुड, क्रिकेट और पॉलिटिशियन, यदि इन तीन को कर लें तो हर चीज वही खा जाते हैं, पूरी सारा फुटेज, सारा बजट, हर चीज वो ले जाती. तो आपको तीसरी चीज कहाँ से दिखेगी? वैसे इंदौर में हो रहा है कि स्मार्ट सिटी, नेतागिरी, ये सब आप कोई भी इंदौरी आराम से आपको बता सकता है कि कितना ज्यादा है. अभी ये मैंने इसलिए लगाया कि थोड़ी देर पहले नीचे एक बारात निकल रही थी, तो आई कुड नॉट हियर यू, तो आई हैड टू वेयर दिस. ये सब यहाँ पे बहुत ज्यादा है. तो कहाँ पे आपको फाइनर चीजों पे ध्यान जाएगा? उसके लिए नगर निगम है, जैसे म्यूनिसिपैलिटी है, कलेक्टोरेट है इंदौर का, इंदौर डेवलपमेंट अथॉरिटी है, इन चीजों को आगे आना चाहिए. अभी ये पॉलिटिसाइज होके ये इन चीजों पे ध्यान नहीं दे पाते हैं. स्मार्ट सिटी प्रोजेक्ट में जो पेंटिंग्स कराई गई हैं उसमें एक भी इंदौर का लोकल आर्टिस्ट या कोई स्टूडेंट शामिल नहीं है. सारे जो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट दिए गए थे वो बाहर की एक कंपनी सॉर्ट ऑफ कुछ सेटअप को दिए गए थे, और वो करोड़ों के प्रोजेक्ट हैं. उसमें से मतलब ये भी एक मिथ बस्टिंग है कि आप जान लीजिए कि इंदौर में फाइन आर्ट्स कॉलेज इतना बड़ा है, हमको पता भी तक नहीं है कि वो वहाँ पे ऐसा कुछ हो रहा है. तो ये सब बाहर के लोगों ने किया है.
Okay, oh, very interesting. Now, before I move to Stanley and Sameer, there is this very interesting question from Mr. K.K. Chandran, who's writing to us from England. And thank you so much, Mr. Chandran, for attending our session from England. So he says that during the World War II, Italian prisoners of war were brought to the area around Indore, Mo. I wonder if there was any osmotic transfer of culture. I remember seeing children with blue and green eyes and very light color skins on a picnic near Mau. तो अवधेश जी, आपको लगता है कि जो स्पेशली पेंटिंग है या आर्ट है, बिकॉज मुंबई में वो हुआ कि लॉट ऑफ दीज वर्ल्ड वॉर II के जो रेफ्यूजीज और प्रिजनर्स थे, उन्होंने बॉम्बे, ये जो स्पेशली प्रोग्रेसिव्स, बॉम्बे प्रोग्रेसिव्स को काफी इन्फ्लुएंस किया. तो आपको क्या लगता है कि ये जो प्रिजनर्स ऑफ वॉर आए थे मालवा में, उनका कोई इफेक्ट रहा वहां के कल्चर पे?
This is the area where I am very weak. I can tell you.
But Mr. Chandran, thank you so much. It's a very interesting question, and I, especially as a historian, I'm definitely going to look into it. So, Stanley, I'll come to you. What do you think about this whole thing about how do you develop local talent in Indore? I mean, because again, it's a cycle.
In this, I think I completely agree with what Deji said, that the state government somewhere has to take an initiative where they are organizing good workshops and they are developing that culture, because now the state government, they have like kind of started giving good subsidy for film shoots in Indore, but then that information is not coming down at ground level to a budding filmmaker, like say for example a young filmmaker like me. If I want to go and make a feature film, so it's not easier for me to get in touch with the government officials, or what the process is. So some higher authority or a higher body should take that initiative to kind of grow that culture, cinema or film wise.
Sugandha, I would like to come to you, and we have been discussing about a lot of problems plaguing Indore city, the loss of culture, loss of heritage, loss of environment. And I mean, the problems are innumerable: pollution, traffic. But what is the solution? I mean, how do we see the rainbow at the end of the darkness? I mean, the silver lining of the clouds.
I will start with telling you what we did about the cultural spaces in Sydney. When I went to Sydney in the early 80s, there was nothing. So a few of us who like classical music, we first decided to get together and to listen to our own collections. Then the musicians amongst us, they started playing. And that used to be a regular monthly feature. Now, many of those, remember one thing, I have a policy, issue of principles. Does an artist always have to be a professional? So even if you give a mature artist a space, they may or may not decide. So what you're talking, all of you seem to be only focused on the professional artists. Why not encourage amateurs and build slowly, getting together, discussing the way Stanley says he started his own small movies. So that may or may not get into being a professional. But an amateur artist still gets a lot of joy and still gives a lot of joy. And professionals are there, you are here, but amateurs are amongst you. So building a group together and enjoying music itself builds a cultural space. And I feel we Indians never really look at the amateur part of the things. We are only talking of professionals. I could never figure out why. And I feel that is being done, because I have listened to a few mahfils in Indore, private mahfils, where people come, join together, sing, मुशायरे भी होते हैं, बैठे बैठे. मैंने कई इंदौर के इसमें देखा है कि चाय पीते पीते आप शेर व शायरी कर रहे हो. That is also a cultural space. Cultural spaces उन्हीं में से निकल के आती है. आप ऐसे ऊपर से लेके हमेशा सरकार को हमको तो भीख मट का कटोरा लेने की कोई जरूरत नहीं है. हम अपने आप भी तो बिल्ड कर सकते हैं. प्रॉब्लम जब आप दूसरों से भीख मांगने जाओगे तो कुछ नहीं होता. खुद अपने आप कुछ शुरू करो. और मैंने अपने एक्सपीरियंस से कह सकती हूँ, आप कर सकते हो. हमने ये सिडनी में किया है और जो काफी बड़ा हो चुका है.
Sugandha, thank you so much for sharing that, because we need solutions, we need answers because we all know the innumerable problems which plague us in India. But we always
Similarly
need
about
solutions.
the green cover, I'll tell you what I did in my 1 kilometer long road. Me and a friend of mine, we researched what were the local species, bought the seeds, created saplings, and for a year we used to go and water, planted them on the roads after they were 6 months old. For a year we used to go and water them ourselves. Today those trees are 50 feet tall trees.
Wow.
अगर किसी को करना है तो करने के लिए बहुत कुछ है सर, पर हम लोगों को ये है कि बाहर से आके हमें कोई करे. हम अपने आप को किसी तरह की मुश्किल देना नहीं चाहते. आज मैंने हमारे यहाँ पूना के रोड के डिवाइडर में हमारे घर के कंपोस्ट डाल डाल के हमने पेड़ बड़े किए हुए. तो बाहर से हम क्यों ढूंढते हैं, मुझे कभी समझ में नहीं आता. सॉरी मेरे स्ट्रांग हो जाता है जरा, बट आई फील दैट कल्चर जो है वो हमारे अंदर से आता है. कोई अथॉरिटीज, कोई वो, ये नहीं होता है कल्चर. कल्चर वो है जो हम सोचते हैं. और अगर हमने हमारे यहाँ पे बच्चों को अडॉप्ट करने के लिए पेड़ दे दिए अभी पूना में, वो बच्चे अपने पेड़ को संभालते हैं, पानी डालते हैं, देखते हैं, पेड़ अपने आप बड़े हो जाते हैं. आई ट्राई टू टेल दिस टू माई सन हु लिव्स इन इंदौर. कौन करेगा, यहाँ किसी को इंटरेस्ट ही नहीं है. खुद अपने आप करने में हमें किसी को इंटरेस्ट ही नहीं है.
So,
ये मुझे प्रॉब्लम दिखता है.
thank you so much. That's very interesting. Sameer, I would like to ask you, agar I mean, it's the same question which I would like to ask you. Ki how can a local talent be developed? How these amateur performers and people who are starting, because this is exactly what you had pointed out, that the classical versus the indie. And now Avdesh ji almost validated what you said, saying ki हम local को तो बिल्कुल मतलब एक validation मिल गया Avdesh ji से what you were saying. So Sameer, if you can tell us what is the solution, how will a local talent of a city, of a mohalla, improve if he doesn't get opportunities? How do you see that?
देखिए, I had a rock band. I formed a rock band when I was 16. जोशिश नाम का हम लोगों ने बैंड बनाया था. There was no rock music culture in central India. There were colleges who were playing in their respective, there were bands who were playing in their respective colleges. So I've been through a phase in my life where what Sugandha ma'am was saying, कि खुद बनाइए आप अपना खुद. So what we started doing is we went to this cafe called Cafe Coffee Day, जो बहुत recently खुला हुआ था. And we told them that, आप टिकट रखिए, आप अपनी कुकीज बेचिए, कॉफी बेचिए, लेकिन let us host a gig here. And that's how the rock band culture started. There was a band from Indore which started coming to Bhopal. Then there were rock festivals happening in Indore, so Bhopal के जो band होते थे वो वहाँ चले जाते थे. So we had to make our own culture. We had to make our own rock music scene which never existed. And even now there are 10-15 rock bands in Bhopal, and there are plenty of them in Indore now. So you have to obviously do it yourself, but it's a sweet spot, and I never said it's indie versus the classical musicians. I was basically proposing that what if it's together, and a sweet spot where we can also, and बहुत important बात अवधेश भाई ने कही कि अब जो local musicians हैं उन्हें उतना exposure है नहीं, जो bands हैं, जो musicians हैं, तो वो उनकी quality check भी देखनी पड़ेगी आपको. You can't just let anyone just come on a stage just for the sake of supporting someone. So there's obviously a little quality check. But the idea is to call these big musicians and established musicians from outside, host them, and make it a mixed bag and have these local.
How about the open mic? एक open mic system होता है, देखिए वो भी तो हो सकता है.
That's happening now.
तो बहुत हो रहा है इंदौर में, बहुत काफी open mic culture चालू हुआ है, जिससे बहुत लोगों को हिम्मत मिलती है. A lot of people who are just at home who've never recited their.
That is culture. That is culture.
Definitely culture. But what I'm trying to say, ma'am, is that जो आप कह रही हैं कि भीख नहीं मांगनी है हमें administration से, but हम एक system का हिस्सा है. All we are trying to say is that when you develop your own culture, हम attention draw कर सकते हैं अपने खुद के scene की towards the scene that you make. So obvious सी बात है, seed हमें ही डालनी है और वो छोटा सा प्लांट हमें उगाना है, और उसके बाद जब आप पे नजर जाने लगे तो एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन से भी एट द एंड ऑफ द डे यू कांट गो अगेंस्ट योर ओन गवर्नमेंट एंड के नहीं. सो आई वाज जस्ट सेइंग दैट जो अवधेश भाई कह रहे थे कि द आइडिया इज टू फाइंड दैट स्वीट स्पॉट वेयर देयर आर अदर म्यूजिशियंस जिनको देखकर, जैसे कबीर कैफे हो गए या जो भी आप एग्जांपल देते हैं, उन्हें देखकर हमारा लोकल टैलेंट इंस्पायर हो एंड दे कैन बेटर देमसेल्व्स. But they have to be hosted together. Sometimes what happens is we get swayed away and we only get the bigger artists and they are the only lineup. Why not have them also so that the local artists can learn from them? There's a beautiful courage that you get when you're sharing the stage with the bigger artists that you've grown up listening to, and you get a lot of encouragement because of that. वो हो जाए एक बार हमारा एक culture develop हो एक and what I've noticed is that what Stanley was saying, for example, they started their own film club. The consistency is missing. तो वन ऑफ एक इवेंट हो तो जाता है, एक वन ऑफ फेस्टिवल हो तो जाता है, but the consistency is not there. So what if we've got something like GIFLIF happening in Raipur and Bhopal now, Great Indian Film and Literature Festival. Now that has become consistent. Because of the pandemic it did not happen, but they've been doing a good job mixing local artists and getting other artists and then trying to do that. And then the administration will also take a note. They will be like कि हाँ यार ये तो खुद का scene brew कर रहे हैं ये लोग. And then we can actually go there and tell them that we've got a certain number of audience already with us, and now can you help us with patronage in terms of can you give us this certain venue and not charge us anything, for example, or can you help us with the resources that only the municipality or the government will have. तो बस मुझे ये लगता है पर्सनली कि कंसिस्टेंसी हो और एक मिक्स बैग हो और हमें खुद तो करना पड़ेगा. that is exactly what I'm trying to do. I think that is exactly what Stanley is also doing. कि भाई अगर कोई और नहीं है तो खुद तो कर रहे हैं आपको. Eventually nobody is going to come and hold your hand and tell you to do anything. तो कंप्लेन भी करते रहनी है क्योंकि कंप्लेन करने से हिम्मत बंधी रहती है. कंप्लेन करना बहुत जरूरी है. तो कंप्लेन ना बंद नहीं करना है हमें. कंप्लेन तो करना ही है कि हमें सपोर्ट नहीं मिल रहा है, जो सत्य है जो जीवन का, पर हम खुद भी कर रहे हैं. सो हम सिर्फ कंप्लेन नहीं कर रहे हैं. सो इट्स अ मिक्स थिंग, बोथ द थिंग्स.
नो थैंक यू समीर, बिकॉज मैं एक बात कहना चाहता हूँ कि आप इंदौर में रहे नहीं हो, बट आपने जो ये सॉल्यूशंस दिए हैं, आप जो ये पर्सपेक्टिव शेयर कर रहे हो, ये भारत के हर कस्बे और शहर के लिए रेलेवेंट है. बिकॉज इट्स नॉट जस्ट इंदौर, आप देवास हो या झांसी हो या गोरखपुर हो या मिर्जापुर हो, ये हर शहर के यूथ के लिए ये एक रेलेवेंट बात है. बिकॉज इन द एंड हम चाहते हैं कि हर जो भारत का जो हर शहर है, every city in India becomes a cultural space in itself. So thank you, Sameer. I mean, thank you so much. It's a very interesting perspective. Thank you, Sugandha. Thank you, Avdesh. Thank you, Stanley. And it was, I mean, I hope that, the audience is really enriched with your perspectives and solutions to how Indore can become a vibrant cultural city. With that, I would like to hand over to Aisha from Avid.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for being here today. This session has been pretty fantastic. We've learned a lot and we're hoping that we kind of continue doing this series, and of course we do have the future cultural capitals planned. Thank you Live History India for partnering with us like always. Thank you audience for being here and staying with us on this lovely Thursday evening. Our upcoming programs on Thursday, that is the 16th, we are talking about residencies across borders. So if anybody wishes to join us, please do register. On the 18th of December, we are actually doing our first live program at the Royal Opera House, and it's going to be with Manjari Chaturvedi, who has conceptualized and directed O Jugni Punjabi. And that is it. Wishing everybody a good night and see you all then.